Every day when we go by, I just wanna go inside, see all the things that we've been missing, or what's cooking in Tom's kitchen. I just like to try a little piece of your life.
Hi, I'm Tom Kime. Welcome to Tom's Kitchen with Breville.
Join me as I show you how to create easy, delicious food that I just know you're going to love.
Today, I'll show you how to make tarte tatin of apples with cinnamon creme anglaise. Now, to start off with, we want a pan on a medium heat. We're going to add to that about 200 grams of sugar. We're just going to add a splash of water to that so that it will melt down. Now, to stop the sugar from forming a hard caramel, we're just going to add a little bit of lemon juice. Now, hardly any at all, just a little squeeze of lemon like that. By adding that little bit of lemon juice, what it will do is it stops the chain reaction of the crystals of the sugar forming a hard caramel. So it will melt, it will caramelize, but it won't go rock hard. And we're nearly ready to add our butter. We need to take it to a slightly darker color, more of a kind of hazelnut brown. And just peel the apples. Now, you want an apple which is beautifully acidic and crunchy, so it will hold its shape when you're cooking it. So just peel them like that. And then we're just going to cut them into quarters. Now I'm using a delicious apple called Jazz, which is now available in New Zealand. And this is an apple which is a cross between a Brabant and a Gala. And it's said to have the loudest crunch ever recorded. So it's a delicious apple, it's very crunchy, it's got a good acidity, which is really important for this dish because our sauce, as you can see, is made of sugar and butter. It's going to be quite rich. You want an apple that's going to hold its shape and keep its acidity. So a Jazz apple is perfect for a tarte tatin. Just trim off the top and the tail. And what's really important here is that you take out all of the hard bit of core. And in cooking, we refer to that bit as the toenail, because even if you cooked it for a long time, it would still be hard like a toenail. So it's really important that when you core your apple that you take out that little hard bit, because it's never going to get soft enough. So my caramel is getting a beautiful golden brown colour, and what we're going to do now is add our butter. And what that is going to make is a butterscotch. Now, a butterscotch is a delicious sauce, literally made of sugar and butter. So the butter stops the caramel from getting too dark, okay? You can see that. Now, very hot. Please be careful with this because there's nothing worse than a sugar burn. And what you tend to do when you burn your finger, you then put it in your mouth and then you burn your tongue as well and you stick the roof of your mouth to your finger with the molten sugar. So try not to do that because it's not that much fun. So, butter and sugar together. I'm just going to turn that off the heat while we add our apples. So it's not going to be bubbling around my fingers. It's just going to be quite still. And you then take your apples that you've quartered and cored and make sure that you've taken the toenail out of the apple. That's a little ridge there which is hard. Make sure that you peel them nicely because even with a really soft dessert like this, where the apples are cooked, you're still going to have that little hard bit. What happened when we put the apples into the pan is we put them presentation side first. Now the presentation side is the curved side because the interesting thing about a tarte tatin is that it actually cooks upside down. What we're going to do is we're going to cook the apples in the pan like this. We're then going to put puff pastry over the top and bake it in the oven, and then it gets turned out right at the end with these beautiful caramelized apples which will have that curved edge uppermost. Now the tarte tatin was invented by two pâtissiers in France called the Tartin sisters, and they made this apple tart for their dad, and as they were taking it out of the oven, they dropped it on the floor, and so they said, oh, well, let's just turn it upside down. He won't notice the difference. So that's how the tarte tatin was born, by accident, as many cooking recipes do start. They are by accident, but this one is a really special dessert. It's absolutely delicious. You could use a combination of apples and pears. You could use a combination of different types of apples, but the Jazz apple is great because it has a great acidity. It's got a beautiful texture. It's really crispy. You can hear that kind of crunch, and that's going to keep its shape and its texture while we cook it slowly in this butter and sugar. Now, the next thing that we need to do is just turn down the heat like that. And guess what? We're going to cook that for about an hour, really, really slowly, on a really low heat until it will start to look like this. Now what we have here is our apples that have cooked down, and all the time just kind of pressing them down so they're forming a nice firm cake of apples, so just like that. Now we're going to roll our pastry, and we've just got some puff pastry. Now puff pastry is something that I never really make any longer. I made it first at college, and I don't think I've made it ever since. So just roll out the pastry, turn it 90 degrees, and roll it out again. We want to get it nice and thin. Okay, just dust it with a little bit of flour. Now puff pastry is something that's very difficult to make. It's very time consuming to make it, and that's why as a chef I just don't really have the time. I'd much rather make a delicious dessert like this and then go and do something else. Now to put your pastry onto the tarte tatin, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the rolling pin as a tool, roll it on there like that, and then roll it out onto your apples. Just with a knife, take off some of the excess like that. But then what we're going to do is we're just going to tuck the pastry down the sides of our apple. Now be really careful with this because it is quite hot still. So just nice and flat, tucked right down like that. And then we're just going to put a couple of holes in it like that to let out the steam. We don't want it to be too soggy. We want it to be nice and golden brown and crisp. Now that's going to go into the oven, and it's going to cook for about 20 minutes. While my tarte tatin is baking in the oven, I'm going to make my creme anglaise. Now, creme anglaise sounds fancy and exotic. It just really translates as custard. So I've got 250 mils of milk, and I've got 250 mils of cream. Those are going to go into a pan on a high heat. 4 cinnamon sticks, so they're going to become fragrant. When they get hot, they're going to release their oils and their flavour, and they're going to concentrate and make a beautiful flavour in our milk. While my milk is heating up, what I'm going to do is whisk my eggs and my sugar. So I'm going to have 3 egg yolks, so just separate the yolks, put them into there like that, and to my 3 egg yolks I'm just going to add about 45 grams of sugar. And what I'm using here is a Breville stick mixer, but it's also got a whisk attachment, so you can just easily just whisk up your egg and sugar. And we just want to whisk it till it's pale and moussey. So when the milk starts to boil like that, just take it off the heat, okay? And we're just going to add a little bit to our milk just to blend it together. Now we don't have to take all the milk out of the pan, but what we need to do is then just return our egg mixture, which has been blended together, to our pan like that. Now when you're making creme anglaise or custard, you've got to stir it with a wooden spoon. You've got to stir it constantly on a really low heat so that it cooks the egg. Now you don't want to have sweet scrambled egg, so you've got to be really careful. Don't just stir in one place like that. You've just got to keep it moving. Now the reason why you use a wooden spoon like this is so that when it's done, you can just run your finger down the back of the spoon, and if the 2 sides separate and don't come together, your creme anglaise is ready. Now my tarte tatin has been cooking in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. We've got a golden brown crust here. It's absolutely delicious. Now I'm going to show you how to plate this up. So whenever a pan is hot, come out of the oven, always leave the cloth on the handle so that everyone knows that it's really hot, because that's how accidents happen in the kitchen. What we're going to do is with a spatula, we're just going to clear down the sides so that nothing is going to stick. Now, lovely big plate on the top of our pan like that. So hand flat on the tarte tatin, pick it up and turn it over like that. Okay? One last little tap, and our moment of truth. Here is our tarte tatin. Now look at that. So just pick up a little piece like that. Absolutely beautiful dessert. So there we have our tarte tatin with cinnamon creme anglaise. How good does that look?
A little piece of your life.